I think the data sprawl is here. It's going to be with us. It's going to continue its logarithmic expansion. And we really have to make two decisions. And decision one is, are we going to try to govern it or deal with it in a way that we can protect it, use it, sanitize it, ensure that people have access to the things that they're entitled to, or are we just going to wash our hands of it?
SC Media and our sponsor Spirion are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Each month, the CISO Stories program explores a cybersecurity topic selected by the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community and provides content that examines that topic from a variety of perspectives. Hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, best-selling author of CISO Compass, the CISO Stories weekly podcast features content powered by the 1,100-plus members of the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CSC. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Nick Ritter, SVP and CISO at First Financial Bank. Welcome, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Todd.
So, Nick, tell me, what sparked your interest in cybersecurity?
I started my career in kind of in intelligence areas and was in IT for a while and kind of got drafted into information security, dealing with a security incident. And so I was, IT infrastructure at the time, early 2000s, and dealing with a major security incident. The company that I was with at the time decided that they should have dedicated security personnel and asked me to build out a team. And I remember seeing somebody, one of my colleagues at the time, and we were waiting for an elevator, and they looked at me and said, "So you're going to be full-time security now, huh?" And I said, "Oh, I guess I am." And sure enough, I was basically full-time security from that time and until now. So that was, almost 20 years ago.
Well, it's a great way to get started with an incident.
Never waste a good crisis, right? I think is one of the mantras, at least early on in my CISO career.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really great place to start. I mean, because you're then backing up into, you see, what happens when controls aren't in place, and then moving back to be able to help prevent that or reduce the risk of that happening.
Yeah, exactly. It's the baptism by fire kind of gives you a view of what can go wrong, what does go wrong, and even when things are designed right from a usability or even a security structure, when the threat actors gain access, you can see how they can manipulate legitimate access in the environment and begin to exploit that. So yeah, it really, that baptism by fire really gave me and my team at the time a view of what we needed to do, both from a prevention standpoint and from a monitoring standpoint, so that we could get the security in the environment right, from a protection and usability standpoint. So it was a good experience. I'm glad I went through it. I hope I never do it again.
So today we're going to be talking about data governance, which is really very critical to being able to secure the assets that we have. Can you give us a good definition of what data governance is and explain its importance to today's modern organization?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I could define it in a concise way. Uh, it- my experience is when you type in data governance into Google, you get about 50 million responses back, and they're all a little bit different, or they're all a little bit um, kind of their own flavor. For me, data governance is the um, the proper identification, storage, usage, and protection of data as an enterprise asset.
I think that's a very good definition of making sure that people have access to the information at the right time that they can get it. So what are some of those common challenges that we have when we're implementing data governance initiatives, and how do we overcome some of those challenges? Got data? Know where it is? At Spirion, they're dedicated to helping organizations find and protect their most sensitive information. A single mission: deliver unmatched 98.5% accuracy in discovering personal, sensitive, and regulated data, no matter where it lives, with actionable insights to protect what matters most. That's why Spirion is step one. Visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/Spirion to learn more.
One of the things that you notice in the industry, and this has been going on for a long time, is data sprawl, right? So I remember early in my infrastructure career buying big EMC storage devices, and it felt like every time we would buy new frames, we were buying double and triple the capacity, right? It was the hockey stick of data exploding within the enterprise. And then as we've gotten into the cloud uh, revolution or the cloud evolution, we've seen the same thing, right? The hockey stick continues to grow, and the usage of data, the development of data, you can't do anything now on your mobile device, in your car. Planes generate gigabytes of data per minute, kind of a thing. So the generation of data has just exploded, and then the analysis of that and the usage of it has created this just massive data sprawl. And as things have moved out into more cloud centric environments, and the introduction of uh, generative AI and large language models, one of the things that we've seen is a tremendous democratization of data and the democratization of IT in general. So the barrier of entry of basic skill sets to analyze, manipulate data, collect data, store data, those barriers are becoming lower and lower, especially with the large language model tools and the generative AI tools and previous generations of machine learning. That democratization of data just continues to grow. And so in the modern IT sense, one of the I'll call it a challenge, but it's a challenge from the perspective of a CISO and a CIO, not necessarily a business challenge, because actually I think that a lot of this trending is very good for a business as a whole. And that is the challenge is, because of the democratization of the data in the enterprise, we have um, less in the way of experts who are gatekeeping the data. And the lines of business, the decision makers in the field have more access to raw data and more access to two tools to manipulate that raw data. And what it does is it creates this big data sprawl. So for people in my chair, CISOs, CIOs, what we see is a big data sprawl. What the business is seeing is more instant access to real time data that allows them to make decisions. So they see it as a net positive. I see it in the business sense as a net positive, but I can see some drawbacks to it as well with this data sprawl because I've got to be able to protect it all. And then overlay a governance aspect to it. We have to make sure that that data is is high quality and consistent. And we can talk about what I mean by that in a moment if you'd like.
So should we be trying to restrict this data sprawl, or how do we deal with that?
I think that the the horse is out of the barn, so to speak. There's no way to restrict it. I don't think that anybody can try to stuff data back in. I think the data sprawl is here. It's going to be with us. It's going to continue its logarithmic expansion. And we really have to make two decisions. And decision one is, are we going to try to govern it or deal with it in a way that we can protect it, use it, sanitize it, ensure that people have access to the things that they're entitled to, or are we just going to wash our hands of it and say it's too big of a problem, we're not going to deal with it, and let the chips fall where they may. Obviously, I'm in the former camp, not the latter, but I think there will be some organizations that wash their hands of data and say it's too big of a problem, we're not going to control it. It'll just be what it is.
Mm-hmm. And I think with hard disk space getting so cheap and processing speeds growing so much faster, that this data just moves out everywhere, and it gets very hard to control. It's, if we look at the effort, for example, for somebody to just clean up their hard drive, versus just buy more space. From a cost benefit standpoint, it just makes sense. Just pop on another hard drive, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we're creating not just the types of data today. If we look at it, we have the video files, for example, and the speeds at which we can transmit those things, that we're generating so much data of so many different types than before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just if you look just momentarily at kind of your own your your own world, I'm young enough, or old, I should say, I'm old enough to remember taking pictures on 35 millimeter DSLR cameras, putting the little winding thing up, putting them in the little black cartridges, stuffing them in an envelope, and either dropping them off at a photo developing. They would have those little shacks in the middle of parking lots of Kmart and stuff like that. Or if you got into photography enough, you'd have a mail order place because they were a little bit cheaper to develop. And you would send stuff off, and then a couple of days or weeks later, you would get envelopes of pictures back, right? And so if you were a really avid photographer, you might take a couple of rolls of, 24 to 36 exposure rolls. You might do 3 or 4 rolls a month, 5 rolls a month if you went on a trip or something like that. Um, and that was your picture. I have over 20,000 pictures on my phone right now. I mean, that's years worth of 35 millimeter photography. I mean, decades worth. And it's just because, I take pictures of things that I want, like almost reminders of, right? Like I'll take a picture of, uh, my wife had written down a couple of things this morning on the counter for me to go pick up at the store on my way home. I just snapped a picture of it. So I've got a quick reminder of what are the things that I need to pick up. Um, that was unheard of 25 years ago, but because of the way technology is now, that's that is commonplace. And so that's just one example of how data in our day-to-day life has exploded.
I remember once I was coming back. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and I was at the airport and I was trying to find my car in the terminal, and I was walking all around and around, and I ended up calling security, and I only to find out that my car was actually in a different terminal. That's why I couldn't find it. And so now, whenever I travel and I when I do park in the terminal, I snap a picture of the
Yep.
location of my car, and then I've got it when I come back, because 2-3 weeks later I'm not going to remember where that spot was. So we're collecting so much data, and some of it's important and some of it isn't. So how do we make sure that we have good, accurate information and it's consistent and people in our businesses can rely on that
Well, I
information?
think that's you hit on a really important point that all data collected isn't important. So understanding what data is important is really the key to establishing governance. You will not be able to effectively um, govern everything. Again, it becomes kind of a Sisyphusian task, right? To try to get control over every piece of every bit and byte in the enterprise. But you can identify the things that are important and make sure that you have good governance around that. And so, one of the elements of good, we talked about there's access to the appropriate people, and there's accuracy of data is kind of our tenets of what the definition of data governance is. And one of those elements is that we have accurate data that's available to people. So one thing we want to make sure that we have of our important data is we want to make sure that we have a common data dictionary around what data means and what are definitions. So I work at a bank, CISO at a bank, and you would think something like your account balance is universally understood within the bank. And it's not, because some people who look at your account balance look at a 30-day average of your account balance. Some people look at a closing balance as of yesterday's close. Some people are interested in the balance with all of the memo postings to it. So things that haven't cleared, but they've basically put a placeholder in your account and what's your account balance post that. Um, and so some people are looking at 3-day averages, some people are looking at 10-day averages, some people are looking at 30-day averages. So having a common definition of things like what is our customer's account balance, that's a really important thing, because if I'm looking at account balances and you provide me a 30-day average and I'm looking for kind of a real time based on debits and credits into the account today, we will make different decisions about things. So things like data dictionaries for important data are really important. And then once you have that, there's another aspect of certified data. Another concept within data governance. And certified data is that the data producer, whatever system, whoever owns the system that is ultimately producing a set of data, and the data consumer, whoever is using that to derive some other decision, the two have an agreement on this is the data I'm using, this is the definition of the data, and this is the use of the data that is going to be used, and this is where that is going to be distributed, who has access to the result. Those four elements make up a certified data element, because once you have certified data, then you can begin to wrap controls around it from a protection standpoint, an access standpoint, and so forth. Without data certification, without that kind of chain of understanding, it gets fuzzy on who has access to it, what is it going to be used for, how do you protect it, and those kind of elements. So those two aspects are pretty fundamental to beginning to protect data. But you can imagine you wouldn't try to create certified data for every data element in your enterprise. You would want to make sure that you're doing that for the important things, and certainly the most important things, and then the rest of it you try to wrap your foundational data protection elements around.
Mhm. It's amazing how many organizations don't have this central idea of data governance, and when they see it, it's very illuminating. In my own career, I actually spent half of my career I was managing data bottlers and database administrators, in data dictionaries and all that sort of stuff. And I worked for a company that provided the pharmaceutical information. It was actually how pharmaceutical companies paid their sales reps, because sales reps don't really sell anything. They go and influence doctors, and you have to figure out a way to do that. But we created this data model that was 900 elements and all these different entities, and we put that to the business, and they were like, wow, we didn't realize how all these things were related to get together. And then you get into the discussion about people had different meanings for the same terms. And it makes it very difficult to architect a system that
It
way, doesn't
does.
it?
It does. It's a tough way to live when you don't have a full picture of what's going on. And the other thing that I think is super important for risk managers, whether it's CISOs, whether it's uh, data protection experts, is data usage, and really to a degree this data sprawl that we kind of label as a negative is vital to the success of the business. And the more that you try to choke that off, the worse the impact will be for the business, and the harder the job is going to be going forward. Because the if you remember the old Jurassic Park movie, right? Jeff Bridges' character, the mathematician, said, "Life will find a way." Well, that's 100% true in enterprises. The business will find a way, and that may involve you and it may not. You want to be you want to be part of the path of least resistance for the business, for life to find its way within the business, so that you can see it, you do have visibility to it. It's not happening in behind you or around you, but it's happening with you. And so it's important for risk managers and CISOs to understand that this data sprawl, as we call it, is really vital to the business. And how do we get involved and help the business utilize this data in the safest way possible, but still meet their speed to decision demands?
How do we, with all the laws that are out there around privacy? We have GDPR, we have CCPA, we have emerging laws around AI, to put some governance around that. How do we make sure that we're protecting individual privacy rights of the individuals, while at the same time we're giving the business the ability to use this data to get good business
Yeah,
insights
it's
out
a
of it?
it's a really solid question, and I think the industry is still figuring it out, so to speak. I kind of go back to my um, original tenet of you can't govern and protect everything. So you have to make sure you understand what's important. So in the case of GLBA, the data types and the combinations of data are reasonably well defined for GLBA. Same for CCPA. Same for GDPR. GDPR gets a little bit. It's a little bit more a little bit broader than either GLBA or CCPA, but fundamentally those give us some guide rails around what data elements we need to make sure that we are paying attention to, that we're inventorying, that we have visibility to, and that we have protection elements wrapped around. None of those elements, regulations, say that you, with the exception of maybe GDPR, there are elements that you should not collect as part of GDPR. But generally speaking, all of those um, legislative actions are allowing for the use of data. It's the proper use of data, right? And so that's the part, is just really understanding what data is being collected in what systems and where it is in the environment.
I think that's great advice. So this has been great, and I think data governance is such a critical issue. It goes back to that mantra that we can't protect what we don't know, what we're not sure of that we don't have, and so we need to have good governance around our systems. So, what final advice would you give to emerging CISOs, current CISOs, new CISOs, experienced CISOs, as they're trying to make sure that they have good governance in their organizations around their data?
I think the best advice that I can give to a CISO is, and this is especially true with the new SEC rules around publicly traded companies. Your role is no longer um, a technology role. If it ever was just a technology role, it's not now. You are, as a CISO, fundamentally a business executive. And we need to act as business executives. We need to work with our peers who are heads of lines of business, business owners, P&L owners, and understand what are the things that they're worried about, what's keeping them up at night, what challenges are they trying to solve, and make sure that the protections that we're putting in place are aligned tightly to those aspects, right? If the thing that you're most concerned about from a CISO is very misaligned to a P&L owner of the thing that they're most concerned about, then there's going to be resistance in the implementation, or resistance in budget, or whatever. But if we're aligned in that we're trying to achieve the same goals, and that we are aligned at a top level business alignment, not just stopping our CISO goals at technology implementations, but understanding and digging in on the business side of things, we will have a lot more success and a lot more seats at the table.
I think that's very well articulated and really should be the mantra of every CISO today. Thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks for
Yeah, thanks
taking
for
the
having
time
me.
with
It's
us.
been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. We want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, Sprawl. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.